Nicholas Roeg's Eureka is an audacious, largely forgotten film that stands as one of the most experimental and daring cinematic experiences of the 1980s. Released in 1983 but shelved for years due to distribution issues, the film was ultimately left in obscurity, despite its immense ambition, mysticism, and a towering performance from Gene Hackman. In many ways, Eureka encapsulates everything that made Roeg one of the most intriguing filmmakers of his generation. Its themes are challenging, its structure unconventional, and its emotional and visual intensity can be overwhelming. Yet, for those willing to dive into its labyrinthine depths, Eureka offers a unique and powerful meditation on the human condition, wealth, power, and the corrosive nature of greed. Though the film divided critics at the time, it deserves reappraisal as a true hidden gem in both Roeg's and Hackman's careers. The story of Eureka is loosely based on the life of Sir Harry Oakes, a real-life prospector who struck it rich during the Klondike Gold Rush and became one of the wealthiest men in the world before meeting a mysterious and violent end. In the film, Hackman plays Jack McCann, a grizzled prospector whose tireless search for gold finally pays off in a life-altering discovery. However, rather than a straightforward tale of rags to riches, Roeg's film is about the dark spiritual cost of immense wealth. After discovering gold in a delirious, feverish moment in the Canadian wilderness, Jack's life shifts dramatically. He becomes fabulously rich, but his newfound wealth brings with it isolation, paranoia, and a creeping sense of doom. McCann moves to a Caribbean island, living in luxurious but lonely isolation with his wife and daughter. Despite his material success, Jack's relationships crumble, and his soul withers. He grows distrustful of everyone around him, including his daughter Tracy, Teresa Russell, and her shady, opportunistic husband, Claude, Rutger Hauer. As Jack descends into madness, his wealth becomes a gilded prison, and the film moves toward a chilling, violent conclusion. At its heart, Eureka is not a story of triumph, but of loss. Jack's fortune serves as both the peak and the downfall of his existence, and Roeg weaves in metaphysical and existential elements to suggest that Jack's success was a curse, not a blessing. The film interrogates the idea that material wealth can bring happiness and fulfillment, exposing instead the emptiness and spiritual decay that often accompany unchecked greed and ambition. True to Roeg's reputation as a visionary director, Eureka is a film that defies conventional narrative structures. Roeg's direction is as elliptical and experimental as ever, blending dreamlike sequences, occult symbolism, and jagged editing techniques that disorient the viewer and reflect the fractured psyche of its protagonist. The film moves fluidly between reality and hallucination, with moments of violence, eroticism, and mysticism layered in a way that makes the viewer question what is real and what is imagined. Roeg, a filmmaker who never shied away from blending psychological depth with visual experimentation, ensures that Eureka is not just a story but an experience. His use of jarring cuts, dissonant soundscapes, and fractured timelines create a sense of unease that mirrors Jack's growing paranoia and despair. The film often feels like a fever dream, with its characters acting as if guided by invisible forces, whether fate, greed, or something more supernatural. There is a constant tension between Jack's desire for control and the chaotic, mysterious forces that seem to surround him, whether through the film's frequent references to the occult or the predatory behaviour of those around him. The first 25 minutes of Eureka have long been praised as one of the greatest openings in cinema history, and for good reason. The sequence is a masterclass in atmosphere, tension, and visual storytelling as it tracks Jack McCann's desperate search for gold in the frozen wastelands of the Yukon. Hackman's portrayal of McCann in these early scenes is nothing short of primal, his face etched with desperation, his eyes flickering with hope and madness as he digs through ice and snow in search of his fortune. Surrounded by wolves and the unforgiving elements, Jack's quest feels as much like a spiritual pilgrimage as it does a physical one. Roeg infuses these scenes with an almost mystical energy, particularly when Jack acquires a strange talisman, a symbol of fate perhaps, that seems to guide him toward his destiny. In a remarkable, surreal moment, Jack visits a brothel where a witch-like figure foretells his future, warning him of the dangers that come with success. This blending of the mystical and the profane is quintessential Rogue, and it sets the stage for the rest of the film's exploration of wealth as a corrupting force. Then, in one of the most memorable sequences of the film, Jack strikes gold. It's a moment of raw, visceral triumph. Hackman, covered in dirt and screaming in joy, embodies the delirium of success. But even in this moment of glory, Rogue inserts a sense of foreboding. The discovery of gold is filmed not just as a victory, but as the unlocking of a curse. It's an exhilarating sequence, but one that also feels deeply unsettling, as if Jack has unleashed something dark that will follow him for the rest of his life. This opening sequence draws immediate comparisons to the opening of Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood, 2007, where Daniel Day-Lewis's character also toils obsessively, in isolation, searching for oil. Both films share a primal, almost elemental depiction of men seeking fortune in hostile environments, and both suggest that the moment of discovery is the beginning of the character's spiritual undoing. Like There Will Be Blood and Citizen Kane, Eureka is a study in how wealth and power corrupt. Jack McCann's rise to immense wealth echoes Charles Foster Kane's accumulation of power, as both men find that their material success leaves them spiritually barren. In Eureka, Jack's fortune only deepens his isolation, paranoia, and existential dread. Similarly, Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood becomes increasingly detached and monstrous as his wealth and influence grow, alienating everyone around him. All three films interrogate the American dream and the belief that success equals happiness. Instead, they reveal that the obsessive pursuit of wealth can often lead to spiritual decay, paranoia, and madness. In Jack's case, wealth becomes a curse, leading him to mistrust even his own family, while Plainview and Kane both lose sight of their humanity in their pursuit of material success. However, Eureka goes a step further by delving into metaphysical territory. Jack's downfall is tied not just to his own moral failings, but to larger cosmic forces: fate, destiny, and even the occult. The film is rich with symbolism, from the talisman Jack carries to the ominous tarot cards and prophetic warnings he receives. Roeg suggests that Jack's discovery of gold was preordained, but also that his downfall was inevitable, as if success itself was a trap laid by unseen forces. Gene Hackman's performance in Eureka ranks among his best, a riveting portrayal of a man who achieves everything he ever wanted, only to realize that it has cost him his soul. Hackman was always a master at playing complex, troubled men, and in Jack McCann he finds a character whose contradictions are laid bare. He is both triumphant and tormented, brimming with psychotic energy and moments of heartbreaking vulnerability. Hackman alternates between fiery, primal delight and crippling fear. His scenes in the film's later half, where Jack grows increasingly paranoid and unhinged, are filled with an intensity that few actors can match. He embodies the archetype of failed masculinity, a man who, despite his wealth and power, is ultimately hollowed out by his fears and insecurities. Hackman's portrayal of McCann's unravelling mental state is nothing short of mesmerising, and his performance anchors the film, giving it an emotional depth that cuts through its surreal layers. Nicholas Roeg was never interested in straightforward narratives. His films are often fragmented, dreamlike, and filled with unsettling imagery and themes. Eureka is no exception, and it showcases Roeg's fascination with death, greed, and the spiritual cost of success. Much like his other works, Don't Look Now, The Man Who Fell to Earth, Eureka explores primal human desires while blurring the line between reality and hallucination. Roeg's interest in the occult, sex, and the darker aspects of human psychology is evident throughout the film. He uses these themes not just as narrative devices, but as metaphors for deeper existential questions. In Eureka, wealth becomes a form of spiritual death, and Rogue's direction emphasizes the inescapable doom that seems to hang over Jack McCann from the moment he discovers gold. Despite being completed in 1983, Eureka wasn't released until 1986 due to distribution issues, and by the time it finally hit theaters, it had largely fallen off the radar. Distributors were hesitant, unsure of how to market such an unconventional film. In conclusion, Eureka is a hidden gem of 1980s cinema, a film as ambitious as it is unconventional. While its themes of wealth and corruption might invite comparisons to classics like Citizen Kane and There Will Be Blood, its metaphysical exploration of fate and the occult sets it apart. At the centre of it all is Gene Hackman, delivering one of his greatest performances in a role that demands both ferocity and fragility. For those willing to embrace its experimental style and Rogue's singular vision, Eureka offers a rich, unsettling cinematic experience that lingers in the mind.